Hi there, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another video. In this one, we're going to talk about composition for watercolor painting. We're going to do an exercise that is really useful for improving fast and improving in the thing that matters most, and that is creating an idea for a painting, okay? So the step that comes before even you sketch what you see is the planning, and that's where most people, I think, fail and don't get the message across. So let's first talk about composition. What is composition? The way I see it, I don't have a dictionary definition here with me, but the way I see it is how you arrange all the different elements of a certain art piece to have it either evoke the emotion you want or have a pleasing and enjoyable experience for the viewer. So in this case, talking about painting and sketching, we're talking about the shapes, the arrangement, the values, the colors, all of these different elements and how they come together to create something that's pleasing to the eye or evokes the emotion the artist wants. This is why also a lot of abstract paintings work, because they abide by those same loosely set rules of creating an enjoyable experience for the viewer or to evoke a certain emotion. It doesn't have to be something that's necessarily representational of something real. It can be also abstract. So what are we going to do and how are we going to learn about it? We're going to do a really cool exercise in which I'm going to show you a picture from a city called Yavne here in Israel. And what this is I took a picture zoomed out, and we're going to create multiple different sketches based on it by zooming in on specific parts, by showing the whole thing, doing landscape orientation, portrait orientation. And I'm going to show you how from one view you can create so many good ideas, so many interesting compositions, and to pass on to the viewer a different experience, I guess. Okay, so this is a really important exercise, because this is where I see most people fail really before they even got to techniques and all of those more shallow surface level things. Okay, so with that being said, let's move on to the table. I'm going to show you exactly how I do it. So here's our reference photo, and hopefully you can see it well, and I'll also put a link down below as always to the original one. What I love about this is the interesting different shapes of light and shadow and highlights, and I loved it. So the first composition, and I don't want to make it too complicated, is actually the way we see it. That's fine too. If you took a picture, that's perfect. You can sketch it out, paint it the way you see it. So let me try and get that kind of thing in. So the way I see it, we have the ground is somewhere around here, so I'm just going to do a line for that. Then we have a bunch of trees that don't even make it to the middle of the scene, so I'm just going to put in an indication for them. And then we have the actual building here, the group of buildings. It's actually one big group of buildings connected between them. I find it really interesting. Now I changed it up just a slight bit here to the left. That's fine, but generally that's the shape. Now we're really in the abstract realm, so what I want to do now is actually just fill in some values to give you an idea of what it will look like, okay? And I do feel like there's a lot of horizontal action going, so I will add these vertical lines for the electricity poles and whatnot. So first thing I'm going to do is just add a bit of shading for the foliage. The foliage is actually the darkest thing here, but I don't want to go overboard here, so we're just going to do it real quick like this, and hopefully you can see everything I'm doing. So that's for the trees. And it's okay that I have some unevenness here down below, because that'll actually help us create some interest. So I don't care about that at all. And foliage don't have a well-defined area anyway. Now what you do want to notice is to have a bit of a variety in the shape, because that's, you know, you want to avoid patterns, so don't do it just a straight line, which is also a very common mistake I see all the time. Now I'm going to go over it again to make it slightly darker, because it is the darkest element here in the scene. So here we go. Let's straighten out just a part of this area. And we basically got the bottom area done. There are some objects here that I can place in just to create some interest in the foreground. That's actually important, so we'll do that. Now we do have the electricity poles here, so that's one. The second one was somewhere around here. And I'll actually pick those up with the eraser, like this, you see? I just did this. I erased some and added this thing, and here we go. We got the shape. We can run some wires, but now let's go on to the building. That's the main part. Now the building is fairly complex, so I don't expect us to go into too many details, but let's just get the outline in an interesting manner and then try to figure out what we can do with it. So we have a bunch of these square shapes, And again, we're staying in the abstract realm here, so I'm not too worried about having everything necessarily look perfectly the same. Here we have a bit of a shadow. You see this interesting shape, so I captured that. Here we have another shadow. Just look at shapes. And if you look at shapes, you'll be fine. Here we have another shadow to the right. This entire thing is kind of in the shadow, but then there's a part that's in the light, and here we go, like this. So we start to get the impression of a building. Now, if you just want to wrap it up here, you don't want to go into too many details, you can just add a couple of windows and you get the message across here. Remember, our goal is the composition. We test out different ideas of how to arrange the scene and whether they're interesting or not. So what I feel like right now is that the foreground is missing a bit of detail, so we can add a couple of figures, see what happens. Just very small ones. Maybe one that's a little closer. It doesn't really matter what you do at this point. We're just testing out what it looks like compositionally. Now the light comes from the left, so let's have these cast a shadow to the right, also the people. And I feel like this is starting to look a little nicer. Okay, here we go. An up-close look of the entire scene. Okay, now let's do something else. I'm gonna zoom in a bit, and this time I want us to challenge ourselves and try and find an interesting portrait-oriented composition, so here we go. I'm gonna first do the frame, and we're gonna have to find a spot that's interesting, and to me, I would say it's around this area. Okay, I'm gonna use the photo obviously for reference, not this, but I'm just trying to figure out and seeing it in my mind's eye. So the way I see it, the foliage is somewhere around here, and then we get the group of buildings. Now here, because there's a smaller section of the buildings, I'm gonna try and get them a little more accurately in. So we got this thing, we got this very, let's go lower, like this, then we've got this very sharp kind of turn here, this shape around here, and we're just testing out ideas. Triangular shape, we have this line going down here, we have this top. This is the highest point of all of the group of buildings, like so. This side's in the shadow, this is light, this is shadow. I know this is complex, I know these shapes are complex. Try and bear with me. Whatever you get out of this, you will get, and that's gonna work, okay? Your mind needs to start working this way, even if this is a tough kind of, exercise. So here we have a bunch of trees, and they're lower. They're significant. They should be lower. I'm putting them higher so that we actually see them. Here's something I learned just from making this quick sketch. I should have brought these here, because that way I wouldn't have the empty space of the sky, and I'll have more room for the trees. So we already learned something interesting about this scene. You see how that works? Now let's start. Okay, we'll start with the trees. Now this time, here's another compositional kind of fact or element. The trees aren't in the middle. They're kind of down there, and I don't want them taking attention from this. So what I'm gonna do is go a little lighter this time. I think one layer is gonna be enough. That way they won't be too dominant, okay? And then here I can put in the stronger shadows, make it a little more interesting, okay? Now, again, I wanna stress, and I know I say this all the time, we're just testing out ideas. You don't need to feel any pressure at this point. All you need to do is test out the ideas, see what they look like. If you like it, keep it. If you don't like it, discard it. And you'll find something eventually that works, okay? So I don't want you to worry too much about this. Now, this is a part of a balcony that's sticking out, so it's gonna cast a shadow like this, okay? Slowly you'll get to learn how to convey these interesting shapes, and it's not necessarily, again, easy at first, but once you start getting the hang of it, it will work. I do want to expose you to that kind of thing, okay? Now, once we're done with this, let's add some windows. Now, notice how I went light with the trees. Let's go darker with these shadows, just to help bring it more to the front, okay? So I'm gonna go a little darker selectively here. Almost, I'm gonna darken almost anything, I think. Almost everything. Here there's an empty section. It's going to be a good candidate for windows. So some windows here, another one here, another one here. Let's darken this up because that's a major point of interest. In fact, let's add some details to it to enhance it. Whether it's antennas or something like that. It's a rather imagine it's an older neighborhood. Here there's a window. I don't know why, but I'm going to place it here. And look at it in a more abstract way. Do you like the way it looks? Do you like this composition? If you do, that's a perfect candidate for a painting. Okay, you see how that works? Now, if you really want to challenge yourself, you can try something very interesting, and that is do an extreme orientation. So instead of this portrait one, go extreme portrait. Maybe something like this. Challenge yourself. Look at the photo and try and figure out how can I put in interest in that small of a shape, okay? You may decide that, let's say, you focus on the electricity pole. So let's do that kind of thing. I'm gonna zoom in a bit. I keep zooming in, sorry, because I feel like you can't see enough. So here, we're gonna put the ground rather low because we wanna show the entire height of the electricity pole. So here we go, electricity pole. And we have the buildings in the back. Now, here, this is our focal point more than the buildings, for example. So what we're gonna do is try and focus on that. So I'm gonna add, the foliage goes kind of below that, okay? And notice how I don't allow this lower section of the foliage to intersect with this. That's another good trick for you. Try not having these elements coincide. If you would have gone like this, it would have looked strange. It would have looked like this divides the foliage in the back, and that doesn't make any sense. So another quick tip for you, hopefully that'll help. Now at the back here are the buildings, and they aren't as important. So I'm just gonna put them perhaps as a silhouette, okay? And this time, the buildings are gonna be lighter. So let's go ahead and darken them, but very gently. And I think I'm gonna put them, all of them in the shadow, because I don't wanna have any strong highlights here to take away from the center of attention, okay? I may add some details in the shadow, but nothing more. So we go rather light, we go window, 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 done. That's a building. Now, for the electricity pole, here we go. For the cables, here we go. Now the trees are gonna be darker this time because they're closer to our focal point. So let's darken these up. And notice how I'm really staying in the abstract realm. I paint it representation, I sketch it representationally, but not really. Okay, just to some degree. Okay, and here we go. We're gonna cast a shadow to the right. On second thought, it could have been more effective to put it on the left and have a longer shadow casting. Okay, what we can do is change the light conditions altogether. Well, we can't because I already put the light here. Basically, you could have the shadow go to the left if you wanted to. But let's do it. Let's keep it like this for now. And we'll obviously get rid of this part, and we're gonna add the shadowy area of this thing, and like this. You could also use a white gel pen, let me show you, to get back some of the highlights if you lost them or to make them more extreme. It doesn't take really well to this kind of sketchbook, it's a moleskin, but you could in theory use it, okay? And then let's go like this. And obviously, because it's a very light background, the wires aren't going to show perfectly, and that's fine. And I do want to add a bit of elements here in the foreground, so let's do a medium shadow. And perhaps, here's something cool we can do. Let's make this shape go above the foliage line, like so, and then have a highlight on top of it, like this. You see, and now we've added another layer of interest and have it cast a shadow. And try not to have that shadow coincide with this shadow, so have it from the back, like this. And you see how slowly but surely you learn how to build different kinds of compositions. You could go square. Let's try and go square and see what works out. Now, you may ask yourself, how do I even know what area of the entire reference should I focus on? Well, the answer is obviously you don't. You test it out. But I'm gonna give you a bit of a tip here. What you can do is find an area with clear shadows, clear shapes of, let me show you here, clear shapes of contrast. So here, there's a nice little combination of the trees, the light building, the slightly darker sky than the building actually, but there's just not enough detail to get it in. But in any case, you can see what I mean by that. And this triangle of shapes can create a lot of interest. Or you could look at this shape. There's a light and then dark behind it. You can, here I like the fact that it's dark. This shape is very clear. There's the sky that should actually be, once again, a little darker than the lightest part of the building. But hopefully you get the point. You want to focus on an area that has some changes in it, some contrast. Whether it's temperature or value or shape, all of these things can help. Let's try out again a square orientation. Let's try something interesting, okay? Let's focus on this area. in the square. So the building is actually gonna, similar to this, but we're just gonna have no sky. Okay, that's gonna be interesting. So the building takes up the entire background. This time I'm gonna put the electricity pole here. We're gonna put the line of light and shadow somewhere around like this. Okay, a little lower, and we're gonna have some dark trees, obviously. And the building is gonna take up the entire back part of the painting. So let's do a very gentle, and you can go at this whichever way you want. Start dark, light, light, dark, doesn't matter. Let's start dark in this instance, okay? So here we go, a bunch of trees. Use whatever technique you want. We're just filling in these areas. We're not doing anything too complex here, okay? If you want to save that highlight now, save it now. If you want to do it later, do it later. Doesn't matter. My point is, this isn't about technique. It's about planning. There we go, a bit of scribbles, a bit of this, that. It's about planning a scene, creating interest, and I know this may seem boring to some people, but that's where all the magic lies in. Okay, that's where you create something of substance, when you focus on these things. And this is what separates, the way I see it, people who just master technique and then regurgitate other people's ideas, and people who actually create something of their own. And not to say that I'm completely in the column of creating something of my own. I also mess this up many times. So it's a constant learning experience. I'm no different than you in that regard. And I know I'm being kind of rough here with that technique, but that's fine. So let's go a little darker here with the trees to differentiate them from the building. You want to have clear shapes. That's one thing that when you do this kind of a value study, you want to make sure that your shapes are clear. The bottom should be really dark. This pencil can't go as dark necessarily. I do have some more B LEDs that can actually go a little darker. I'm not going to put almost any detail here in the background, it doesn't matter. But we do have these piles of construction work supplies, so we're going to put those in here. So just putting all of them in, and I think that'll create a nice little effect of interest in the foreground. Then have them cast a strong shadow. Let's have this shadowy part of the electricity pole, and look how beautiful that is. That works out really well, and if you want, you can add a couple of blurry windows here in the shadow or something like that, just to hint that this is a building. You could also decide that you do see some of the sky and cut it out like this. You could go, here is the side of the building, and here we go like this, and show some of the sky. But you don't have to. That's the thing, we're testing out different ideas. You could add a bit more details on this pole here, maybe add a couple of these. Maybe this isn't interesting enough. Maybe we need a person here. Let's put a person here. I don't know. Let's try it out. Let's put this cliche watercolor person that wears a suit. Here we go. That's a suit. That's a tie. See, those are pants. You see how these ideas work together? Here we go. Why is he wearing a suit walking around in a construction site? Who knows? But let me zoom out and we're gonna go over everything we did here. So here we go. That's the gist of it. You take one reference photo, you turn it into multiple different compositions. How are you gonna know that something is good? You will not. You give it a try and you'll see how that works out. You like it, keep it. You don't like it, discard it. And then the best part is you can use whatever you created with together with the reference photo or view to create a finalized painting. So you refer both to this when it comes to the drawing and to the reference when it comes to the painting stage, and to figure out the values and all of that, okay? But you have to get used to doing this. Even if you can't draw, just go like this, create a scene, divide it into ground, trees, building. I don't care how you're gonna do it. Make it as simple as you can. You have to do these types of studies. Okay, you have to be able to figure out how to build a scene in an interesting way, just like I'm doing now. How long did this take me? Like 3 seconds? So just 3 seconds and I got this sketch in, okay? Really, it's really quick, okay? So no excuses, try and get this done. Let me know in a comment down below what you think. Now let's wrap this video up. So this is all there is to this exercise, and in the beginning you won't know exactly what to do. You won't know how to arrange the elements as anything. This takes practice. Take your time, work on it. It's going to be a bunch of failures that are going to lead you to a bunch of successes. Now, I cannot stress this tip enough. When you're outside, this is why it's so important, because you see a huge scene and you don't know what to make of it, okay? So this exercise is really good in getting your mind working that way. And I will add a pro tip to that. if you're taking pictures, and you should take a lot of pictures, I take a lot of them because I always need painting references. When you take a picture, try taking it zoomed out. Even if you're only planning on painting a single object, such as, I don't know, you see a bicycle or a person that's interesting, you want to paint them, and maybe ask for permission if you're gonna take a picture of one person, but you get the idea. Even if it's a still life arrangement, take the picture from afar so that you have more options to play with when it comes to composition. Maybe you want to place it to the left, maybe you want to place it to the right. You want to have that gap around it. If you can multiple angles, that'll help too in some cases, but I really want you to try taking the photo from afar and thus giving you a lot of options to work both vertically, horizontally, and whatever you want, okay? Now, if you want to learn more about that kind of thing, how to loosen up, how to enjoy the painting process, how to actually get the results you want, be sure to check out my frustration-free watercolor course in the description box below. Feedback is in, and people find it very, very helpful. I've worked so hard on this course just to make sure that it solves that problem. This isn't a generic watercolor for beginners course. It's not a generic watercolor techniques course. It's an actual product that's meant to solve your problem of if you're struggling, if you can't let go, if your paintings are stifled, we're gonna solve that, okay? So if that's something that interests you, check it out in the description box below. And I do want to remind you, if drawing is where you're having your limitations or where you're having a hard time, I'm also gonna put a link down below to my beginner's drawing course that you definitely want to check out. It'll give you a better example of how I approach drawing what I see from observation. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Ask me any questions you have. I will answer. I will try and do my best to answer everything. There's a lot, but I'm doing my best. So thank you so much. We'll see you again in the next vid.